Lucy Bennett wiped down another table at the Golden Leaf, a fancy restaurant in downtown Chicago. Her feet hurt after 8 hours of walking back and forth across the polished marble floors.
Wow.
This was her fifth 12-hour shift this week. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her black uniform was still neat despite the long day. Lucy was known for keeping herself together even when she was tired. "Table 7 needs water refills," called out Gina Morris, the restaurant manager. Gina was a tall woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She ran the Golden Leaf like a military operation. Right away, Lucy answered with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She grabbed a water pitcher and headed to the table where 4 businessmen in expensive suits were laughing loudly. Lucy was 26 years old, though the dark circles under her blue eyes made her look older. 3 years ago, she had been on a different path. She had been a student at the Mason School of Music, one of the best music schools in the country. Her piano playing had earned her a partial scholarship, and her future had seemed bright with promises of concert halls and recording contracts. Then, her mother got sick, cancer, the kind that required expensive treatments, not covered by insurance. Lucy's father had died when she was 12, so there was no one else to help. She had left school 6 months before graduation to care for her mother and work to pay the mounting medical bills. Now her mother was better, thankfully, but the bills remained. Lucy's dreams of becoming a concert pianist seemed further away with each passing day. The only piano she touched these days was the old upright she had bought secondhand for her tiny apartment. She played late at night when she couldn't sleep, her fingers dancing over the keys as she remembered what it felt like to have a purpose beyond serving food to people who barely saw her. "More water, gentlemen?" Lucy asked as she approached table 7. One of the men waved his hand without looking at her. Another was too busy talking on his phone to acknowledge her. Lucy carefully refilled each glass, making sure not to spill a single drop. "Hey, can we get some more bread?" asked one of the men, finally glancing up at her. "Of course, sir." Away, Lucy replied politely as she walked back to the kitchen. Lucy heard the men resume their conversation about a new tech company they were investing in. They were talking about millions of dollars like it was pocket change. Lucy tried not to think about how even a tiny fraction of that money could pay off her mother's medical debt and maybe allow her to finish her degree in the kitchen. The noise level rose as cooks shouted orders and dishwashers sprayed plates. Clean. This was the real heart of the Golden Leaf, not the quiet, elegant dining room where customers ate overpriced food. Lucy grabbed a bread basket and filled it with fresh rolls still warm from the oven. "How's it going out there?" asked Carlos, one of the cooks. He was one of the few staff members who always treated Lucy with kindness. "Same as always," Lucy said with a small shrug. "Rich people being rich?" Carlos laughed. "One day they'll be working for you." Lucy smiled but didn't reply. Carlos didn't know about her musical background. None of her coworkers did. It was easier that way. Easier not to explain why someone with her talent and education was serving dinner to people who would never remember her face. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of food orders, drink refills, and polite smiles. By the time Lucy clocked out at 11 p.m., her feet were throbbing and her back ached. But tomorrow was her day off, and she had plans to visit her mother and then practice piano for as long as her tired hands would allow. Lucy walked 3 blocks to the bus stop. The Chicago night was cool, and she pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders. As she waited for the bus, she hummed a piece by Chopin, her fingers moving slightly as if playing invisible keys. The bus ride to her neighborhood took 30 minutes. Lucy lived in a small apartment building on the north side of the city. It wasn't in a bad area, but it wasn't good either. The rent was what she could afford on a waitress's salary, while still making payments on her mother's medical bills. When Lucy opened the door to her apartment, she was greeted by silence. The place was small, just 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living area barely big enough for her piano. But it was clean, and it was hers. Photos of her mother lined the walls, along with a few framed music certificates from her school days. Lucy didn't bother turning on many lights. She just headed straight for the bathroom, where she took a long, hot shower to wash away the smell of food and the feeling of being invisible. Afterward, wrapped in her bathrobe, Lucy sat down at her piano. The upright Baldwin was old and slightly out of tune, but Lucy loved it anyway. She had found it at a thrift store 2 years ago and had spent an entire month's tips to buy it. The man who sold it to her had no idea of its value or what it meant. To Lucy to have a piano in her home again, her fingers touched the keys gently at first, like greeting an old friend. Then she began to play Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Sad, beautiful notes filled her small apartment. As she played, Lucy closed her eyes and imagined she was on a stage, wearing a beautiful dress instead of a bathrobe, playing for an audience that appreciated the music instead of talking over it. The piece grew more intense, and Lucy's fingers moved faster. All the frustrations of the day poured out through the music. The businessman who hadn't looked at her, Gina's constant reminders to know her place, the years of education she couldn't use, her mother's illness, the dreams she had put on hold. When the final notes faded away, Lucy opened her eyes and was back in her small apartment. A tear slid down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. Self-pity wouldn't pay the bills or bring back lost opportunities. Lucy's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her mother. "Hope you had a good day at work. Love you." Smiled. And typed back, "It was fine. Seeing you tomorrow. Love you too." She didn't tell her mother how much she hated her job or how much she missed playing piano for real. Her mother already felt guilty about Lucy leaving school. There was no need. To make her feel worse, Lucy looked at the clock. It was nearly 1 a.m. She had to be up at 9 tomorrow to visit her mother. But she couldn't bring herself to leave the piano just yet. She began to play again, this time a lively piece by Liszt that required all her concentration and skill. As her hands flew over the keys, Lucy felt truly alive for the first time all day. Here, in the middle of the night, with only the moon as her audience, she wasn't a waitress. She was a musician, an artist, the person she was meant to be. Tomorrow she would go back to being Invisible Lucy, the waitress who smiled and nodded and refilled water glasses. For now, for these precious minutes at her piano, she was the Lucy Bennett who once had dreams big enough to fill concert halls. Little did she know that in just a few weeks, a chance encounter with a rude billionaire would change everything and bring those dreams rushing back in ways she could never have imagined. 2 weeks later, Lucy arrived at the Golden Leaf for her evening shift. She noticed something different as soon as she walked in. The staff was moving faster than usual and Gina was checking every table twice. "What's going on?" Lucy asked Jenny, another waitress who was fixing her hair in the staff bathroom. "William Grant is coming tonight," Jenny said with wide eyes. The William Grant. Lucy had heard the name before. William Grant was one of the richest men in America. He had started a software company in his garage 15 years ago, and now he was worth billions. His face appeared on business magazines, and people talked about him like he was a celebrity. "He's reserved the private dining room for him and his business friends," Jenny continued. "Gina says everything has to be perfect. She's putting her best staff on it." Lucy nodded, thinking she would probably be serving regular customers as usual. She was surprised when Gina called a quick meeting before the dinner service. "Listen up, everyone," Gina said, looking more stressed than Lucy had ever seen her. "William Grant is bringing 11 guests tonight. They're celebrating a big business deal. This could mean a lot for our restaurant if we impress him." She looked at her clipboard. "Lucy, you'll be their server tonight." Lucy blinked in surprise. "Me, yes, you. You're the most careful server we have, and you don't make mistakes. Just keep their drinks full, bring their food hot, and stay invisible, unless they need something, understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Lucy said, feeling both proud and nervous. At exactly 7 p.m., William Grant arrived with his group. Lucy watched from a distance as Gina personally welcomed them and led them to the private dining room. Grant was shorter than Lucy. I had expected, with dark hair that was going gray at the temples. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Lucy's yearly rent. And he walked with the confidence of a man who was used to being the most important person in any room. Lucy took a deep breath and entered the private dining room with a tray of water glasses. She moved quietly around the table, placing a glass at each setting. The men and women were already deep in conversation, talking about stock prices and market shares. No one looked at Lucy. "Good evening," she said, when she had finished with the water. "My name is Lucy, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start anyone with a drink from the bar?" William Grant looked up at her for the first time. His eyes were sharp and calculating. "Bring us your best champagne. 6 bottles." Lucy nodded. "Right away, sir." For the next hour, Lucy moved efficiently around the table, bringing drinks and appetizers, clearing plates, and making sure everything was perfect. The group was celebrating loudly, toasting to their success and talking about how much money they were going to make to the Grant-Soft merger. William Grant said, raising his glass. $2 billion, ladies and gentlemen. It's the largest deal in our company's history. Everyone cheered. Lucy tried to imagine what $2 billion looked like. It was enough to pay her mother's medical bills 1,000,000 times over. As the night went on, the group got louder and more demanding. One woman kept sending her food back, claiming it wasn't cooked right. A man snapped his fingers at Lucy whenever he wanted more wine. But William Grant was the worst of all. He seemed to enjoy making Lucy run back and forth with small requests. "This knife has a water spot," he said, holding it up when Lucy brought the main course. "I'm very sorry, sir. I'll bring you a new one right away," Lucy said, taking the knife. "And more bread," he added. "The bread here is the only thing worth eating." Lucy rushed to get a new knife and more bread. When she returned, Grant was telling a story about a waiter who had spilled wine on him at another restaurant. "I made sure he was fired," Grant said with a laugh. "People need to learn there are consequences for incompetence." The new knife and bread basket on the table and stepped back. As she turned to leave, her elbow bumped a water glass. The glass tipped over, spilling water across the white tablecloth and onto the lap of a woman in an expensive red dress. The woman jumped up with a small scream. "My dress!" she cried. Lucy's face went hot with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," she said, grabbing napkins to soak up the water. "I'm so sorry, ma'am." William Grant sighed loudly. "Oh well. Looks like we have another example of incompetence, doesn't it?" The whole table went quiet, watching the scene. Lucy kept her head down as she tried to clean up the spill. "Tell me," Grant said, his voice cold, "how much do you make here?" $7 an hour? 8, plus tips from generous people like us?" Lucy didn't answer. She just kept wiping up the water, her hands shaking slightly. "Let me guess," Grant continued. "You couldn't make it in the real world, so you're here serving people who did. That's how it works, isn't it? Some people are meant to serve, not succeed." A few people at the table laughed. The woman in the red dress was still trying to dry her dress with a napkin. "I'll get you a clean tablecloth," Lucy said quietly, still not looking up. "Don't bother," Grant said. "Just try not to spill anything else. Do you think you can manage that?" Lucy nodded. Feeling her eyes sting with tears she refused to let fall. "Yes, sir. I apologize again for the accident." She escaped to the kitchen, where she took several deep breaths to calm herself. Carlos noticed her distress. "What happened?" he asked. "I spilled water on a customer," Lucy said. "In the Grant party?" Carlos winced. "Gina's going to be mad." "I know." Lucy straightened her shoulders. "I need to get back out there." When Lucy returned to the private dining room, the mood had shifted. Grant was walking around the room looking at the decorations. He stopped in front of the grand piano that sat in the corner of the room. It was mainly for shows. Golden Leaf occasionally hired a pianist for special events, but most nights it sat unused. Grant ran his fingers over the shiny black surface of the piano. "Nice instrument," he said, then turned to look at Lucy. "Can anyone here actually play this thing? Or is it just for show, like the people who work here?" Lucy felt a stab of anger, but kept her face neutral. "We have a pianist who comes in for special events, sir." "But not tonight," Grant asked, lifting the cover to reveal the keys. He pressed one, the sound loud in the suddenly quiet room. "No, sir. Not tonight," Lucy replied. Grant shook his head and closed the piano cover. "Shame to have such a fine instrument and no one to play it. But I suppose that's what happens when you hire people for their ability to carry plates rather than their actual talents." Lucy bit her tongue to keep from responding. She continued serving the meal, enduring more small comments and jokes at her expense. When the group finally left 3 hours later, Grant made a show of counting out a small tip. "For your efforts," he said, leaving a $20 bill on the table. The bill for the evening had been over $3,000 after they left. Lucy cleaned up the private dining room, her mind replaying all the humiliating moments of the evening. As she wiped down the piano, she couldn't help herself. She sat down on the bench and lifted the cover. Her fingers hovered over the keys. This piano was much nicer than her old upright at home. It was a Steinway, probably worth at least $100,000. Lucy pressed one key, then another, feeling the familiar weight of the keys under her fingers. "What are you doing?" Gina's sharp voice made Lucy jump. "That's not a toy, Lucy. And after that disaster tonight, you should be focusing on your job, not playing around." Lucy quickly closed the piano cover. "Sorry, Gina. Grant complained to me about the spill," Gina said. "You're lucky he still left a tip. And luckier that I'm not firing you. Just ... Know your place, Lucy. That's all I'm asking. Know your place." The words echoed in Lucy's mind as she finished cleaning up and headed home. On the bus, she looked out the window at the dark city streets, wondering when exactly she had accepted that her place was serving rude rich people instead of playing music. When she got home, Lucy sat at her piano but couldn't bring herself to play. For the first time in years, the keys under her fingers brought no comfort. William Grant's mocking voice was too loud in her memory. Some people are meant to serve, not succeed. Lucy closed the piano cover and went to bed, unaware that in just a few days William Grant would be back at the Golden Leaf, and next time, everything would be different. A week after the uncomfortable night with William Grant, Lucy was folding napkins in the dining room when Gina called an emergency staff meeting. Lucy joined the other servers and kitchen staff in the back office, where Gina looked even more stressed than usual. "I just got a call from William Grant's assistant," Gina announced. "He's hosting a charity event here tomorrow night. 50 people, including some of the wealthiest business owners in the city." The staff exchanged nervous glances. 50 important guests was a big deal for the restaurant. "This could put the Golden Leaf on the map," Gina continued. "If we impress these people, we could see our business double. I need everyone at their best tomorrow." Lucy's stomach tightened. She hoped she wouldn't have to serve Grant again after last week's humiliation. "Lucy," Gina said, "you'll be on the regular dining room floor. Grant specifically asked for Jenny to handle his party." Lucy felt both relieved and slightly insulted. She knew she was a good server despite the water incident, but she was glad she wouldn't have to face Grant again. "One more thing," Gina said, looking at her phone. "Mr. Grant requested live piano music for the event. I called our usual pianist, Paul, but he's sick with the flu. Does anyone know a piano player who could fill in on such short notice?" The room was silent. Lucy stared at the floor, her heart beating faster. "No one?" Gina asked, looking around the room. "This is a disaster." "Grant specifically asked for piano music during dinner." Lucy took a deep breath. She could stay quiet and avoid any connection to the piano. She could speak up and risk more mockery if Grant recognized her. But the thought of someone else playing that beautiful Steinway, when she hadn't touched a proper grand piano in years, made her decision clear. "I can play," Lucy said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Eugenia asked, raising an eyebrow. "You play piano?" Lucy nodded. "I studied at the Mason School of Music for 3.5 years. Gina looked skeptical. "Playing a few songs isn't the same as providing music for a high-class event, Lucy?" "I was going to be a concert pianist," Lucy explained, feeling strange saying these words out loud to her coworkers. "Before I had to leave school." The room was silent again, but now everyone was staring at Lucy with surprise. "Prove it," Gina said finally. "Show us what you can do now." Lucy followed Gina to the private dining room where the grand piano waited. The other staff members crowded in behind them, curious to see if quiet Lucy the waitress could really play. Lucy sat down at the piano bench and adjusted it to her height. It had been so long since she had played a piano this nice. She placed her hands on the keys, closed her eyes for a moment, and began to play. She chose Chopin's Ballade No. 1, a piece that started softly but built to a powerful emotional climax. Her fingers remembered every note, every subtle change. In tempo, as she played, she forgot about her audience, forgot about William Grant, forgot about being a waitress. She was just Lucy Bennett, musician. The piece lasted nearly 10 minutes. When Lucy played the final notes and opened her eyes, the room was completely silent. She turned to see her co-workers staring at her with open mouths. Carlos had tears in his eyes. Even Gina looked stunned. That was ... double quotes. Gina started, then stopped and cleared her throat. That was unexpected. I told you, Lucy said simply. Why? Didn't you ever say anything? Carlos asked. All this time, you've been serving food when you can play like that? Lucy shrugged. I needed the job. And it's not like being a waitress and being a pianist are usually connected. Gina was checking. Her phone, her business mind, already working. You'll play tomorrow night, she decided. But you'll need to serve tables for the first part of your shift. We're short-staffed as it is. What should I wear? Lucy asked. I don't have any fancy performance clothes anymore. Gina frowned. We don't have time to find you anything. You'll just have to wear your server uniform. It's black at least. Lucy nodded, trying not to feel disappointed. She had once owned beautiful dresses for performances, but she had sold them years ago to help pay for her mother's treatments. Be here at 3 tomorrow to help set up, Gina said. You'll serve until 7, then play from 7:30 until the end of the event. And Lucy, ... Gina hesitated. Don't mention to anyone that you're usually a server here. Grant might not like that we're using staff for entertainment. I understand, Lucy said, though the request stung a little. The next day, Lucy arrived early to help prepare for the charity event. The restaurant was transformed with fresh flowers on every table and small glowing candles, creating a warm atmosphere. In the private dining room, round tables replaced the usual long one, and a small stage area was set up near the piano. Lucy worked quickly, setting tables and polishing glasses. Her mind was on the music she would play later. She had stayed up late practicing on her old upright piano at home, creating a list of pieces that would work well for a dinner event. At 6:30, guests started to arrive. Lucy served drinks and appetizers, keeping her head down and trying to blend in with the other servers. She noticed William Grant greeting people by the door, looking important in an expensive tuxedo. He didn't seem to recognize her, which was a relief. At 7:15, Gina pulled Lucy aside. Time for you to get ready to play. Remember, you're a professional pianist we hired for the night, not a server. Lucy nodded and slipped away to the staff bathroom. She washed her hands carefully and splashed some water on her face. She wished she had something nicer to wear than her plain black server uniform, but it would have to do. Down from its tight bun and brushed it quickly, letting it fall around her shoulders. When Lucy returned to the private dining room, all 50 guests were seated and enjoying their first course. A small spotlight had been set up to illuminate the piano. Lucy took a deep breath and walked to the instrument, feeling strangely calm. This was where she belonged, even if no one else knew it. Gina stepped to the center of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, while you enjoy your dinner, we have arranged for some live music. Please welcome our pianist for the evening. There was polite applause as Lucy sat down at the piano. She adjusted the bench, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play a gentle Mozart piece. The conversations around the room continued, with the music as a pleasant background. For the next half hour, Lucy played soft, classical pieces that wouldn't interrupt the dinner conversations. She was just a background element, like the flowers or candles, and that was fine with her. She was playing a beautiful piano again. That was enough. Then William Grant stood up and tapped his glass with a spoon, calling for attention. The room went quiet, and Lucy stopped playing. Thank you all for coming tonight, Grant said. As you know, my foundation is raising money for music education in underprivileged schools. Music changed my life when I was young, and I believe every child deserves the chance to experience its power. Lucy was surprised. She hadn't known what the charity event was for. The idea that William Grant, who had been so dismissive of her, cared about music education seemed strange. I'd like to request something special from our pianist, Grant continued, turning toward Lucy. Could you play something more Substantial? Something that shows what a trained musician can really do? Lucy's heart raced. This was her moment. Grant still didn't recognize her in the dim lighting with her hair down, but he would soon. She looked directly at Grant and nodded. "I'd be happy to," she said clearly. Lucy turned back to the piano, took a deep breath, and placed her hands on the keys. Then she began to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto. No. 2. One of the most beautiful and challenging pieces in the classical repertoire. The room went completely silent as the powerful music filled the space. Lucy played with all the emotion and skill she had developed through years of dedicated practice. Her hands moved across the keys with precision and grace, bringing the complex piece to life. As she played, Lucy glanced up and saw William Grant, staring at her, his face showing growing recognition.
Ow.
Their eyes met, and Lucy saw the exact moment when he realized who she was. The waitress who couldn't make it in the real world is now leaving him and every other person in the room completely speechless. Lucy's fingers moved across the piano keys with speed and passion. The Rachmaninoff piece built to its powerful climax, filling the room with sound. Every person sat still, their dinner forgotten, as they watched Lucy play. William Grant couldn't take his eyes off her. His face had turned pale when he recognized her. The waitress he had mocked just a week ago was now playing one of the most difficult piano pieces ever written, and playing it beautifully. Lucy didn't look at him again. She was lost in the music, her body swaying slightly as her hands created magic on the keys. Tears formed in her eyes, but she didn't stop. This moment, this chance to show her true talent, was something she had dreamed about for years. When she finished the Rachmaninoff piece, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the room exploded with applause. People stood up from there, tables clapping and cheering. Lucy bowed her head slightly, unused to such attention after years of being invisible. Before the applause died down, Lucy began her next piece. She chose Liszt's La Campanella, known as one of the most technically challenging piano pieces in existence. Her fingers moved so quickly, they became a blur. The difficult jumps and trills that would challenge even professional pianists seemed easy under Lucy's skilled hands. Several guests held up their phones to record her performance. Others simply watched with amazed expressions. In the back of the room, Lucy could see the restaurant staff peering through the doorway, their faces showing pride and surprise. William Grant remained standing, his champagne glass forgotten in his hand. He watched Lucy with an expression that mixed shock, embarrassment, and growing respect. When Lucy finished La Campanella, the applause was even louder than before. An older woman at a front table wiped tears from her eyes. A man in an expensive suit shook his head in disbelief. Lucy played one more piece, Chopin's Fantasy Impromptu. The beautiful, flowing melody showed a different side of her talent, not just technical skill, but deep emotion and musicality. As the final notes faded away, Lucy finally looked up. The entire room was on their feet, giving her a standing ovation. Several people were shouting, "Bravo!" William Grant was clapping harder than anyone, a strange expression on his face. Lucy stood and gave a small bow. Her heart was racing, and her cheeks were flushed. It had been so long since she had performed for an audience. She had forgotten how it felt to share her music with others, to see their faces as they connected with the sound she created. As she stepped away from the piano, a woman approached her quickly. She was elegantly dressed in a deep blue gown, with silver hair styled perfectly. "That was extraordinary," the woman said, holding out her hand. "I'm Catherine Powell from Starlight Records." Lucy shook her hand, surprised. Starlight Records was one of the biggest classical music labels in the country. "Thank you," Lucy said. Not sure what else to say. "Here's my card," Catherine said, pressing a small white card into Lucy's hand. "Call me tomorrow. I need to talk about your future." Before Lucy could respond, other guests surrounded her, asking questions and offering compliments. A middle-aged man who introduced himself as the director of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra asked where she had studied. A woman who ran a music school asked if she would consider teaching master classes. Lucy answered their questions simply, explaining that she had studied at the Mason School of Music but had to leave before graduating. She didn't mention that she was actually a waitress at the restaurant. The guests assumed she was a professional pianist hired for the event, and Lucy didn't correct them. After nearly 20 minutes of talking to excited guests, Lucy noticed William Grant standing at the edge of the group waiting for his chance to speak with her. The other guests, seeing their hosts, politely moved aside. Grant approached Lucy slowly. Up close, she could see that his confident expression had been replaced with something more humble. That was ... double quotes, he began, then stopped. I've never heard anyone play like that? Anywhere? Thank you, Lucy said, keeping her voice neutral. You're the waitress from last week, Grant said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Lucy replied. I am. Grant looked uncomfortable. I didn't know. Most people don't bother to know, Lucy said quietly. Around them, people were returning to their tables for dessert. Lucy could see Gina hovering nearby, probably worried about what she and Grant were discussing. Why do you work as a waitress? When you can play like that, Grant asked, genuine confusion in his voice. Lucy took a deep breath. My mother got sick. Cancer. I left school to care for her and pay the medical bills. By the time she recovered, I couldn't afford to go back. Grant was silent for a moment. I'm sorry, he said finally. About your mother, doubt, and about what I said to you last week. It was cruel and completely wrong. Lucy hadn't expected an apology. She nodded, accepting his words. Would you play one more piece? Grant asked. Please. Lucy looked at the piano, then back at Grant. What would you like? To hear whatever you want to play, Grant said. Whatever means the most to you. Lucy returned to the piano as the room quieted again. She sat down and thought for a moment. Then she began to play Debussy's Clair de Lune, a piece her mother had always loved. It was softer and more delicate than the impressive pieces she had played earlier, but it carried more emotion as she played. Lucy thought about her journey, the years of practice, the dreams put on hold, the long shifts at the restaurant, nights playing her old upright, piano alone in her apartment. All of it had led to this moment, this chance to share her gift again. When she finished, the applause was gentler, but just as appreciative. Lucy stood and bowed one final time. She walked away from the piano. She saw Catherine Powell talking intently with William Grant. They both looked in her direction, then continued their conversation. Gina approached Lucy with wide eyes. Every single person in that room is talking about you, she said. Do you know who Catherine Powell is? She gave me her card, Lucy said, still feeling dazed by everything that had happened. She's only one of the most powerful people in classical music, Gina said, and she wants to talk to you. Lucy, this could be huge. Lucy nodded, trying to process it all. I should get back to work, she said automatically. Gina laughed. Are you kidding? You're done being a server tonight? Go sit down, have some food? I think you've earned it. For the rest of the evening, Lucy sat at a small table in the corner, watching the charity event continue. Several guests came by to speak with her, including a few who offered her their business cards. Lucy collected them all, still not quite believing what was happening, as the night came to an end. William Grant approached her table. He sat down across from her without asking. I made some calls, he said. The Mason School of Music would be happy to have you return to complete your degree. With a full scholarship. Lucy stared at him. Why would you do that? Grant looked uncomfortable again. Let's just say I'm trying to fix a mistake, one of many I've made. Before Lucy could respond, Catherine Powell joined them. I've been telling William about my plans for you, she said to Lucy. Starlight Records would like to offer you a recording contract. We could have you in the studio next month. Lucy felt tears forming in her eyes again. After years of struggle, after giving up her dreams to care for her mother, after being mocked and overlooked, everything was changing in a single night. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Say yes, Catherine said with a smile. William Grant stood up. Think about it. Call Catherine tomorrow. And Lucy, ... He hesitated. Thank you for the reminder that we should never judge people before we know their full story. As Grant walked away, Lucy sat in the quiet corner of the restaurant where she had worked for 3 years, holding business cards that promised a new future. Tomorrow, she would call Catherine Powell. Tomorrow, she would tell her mother the incredible news. Tomorrow, her life would truly begin to change. But tonight she simply enjoyed the moment, knowing that her music had finally been heard. The morning after the charity event, Lucy woke up early, despite having slept only a few hours. She sat on the edge of her bed, looking at the business cards spread out on her small bedside table. Catherine Powell's elegant white card sat on top. It still felt like a dream. Lucy picked up her phone and called her mother. "Mom, can I come over this morning? I have something amazing to tell you." An hour later, Lucy sat at her mother's kitchen table, telling her everything that had happened at the charity event. Her mother, Helen, listened with wide eyes and a hand pressed to her heart.
"Oh, Lucy,"
Helen said when the story was finished. "I always knew your talent would find a way to shine." "I didn't," Lucy admitted. "I thought those dreams were over." Helen reached across the table and squeezed Lucy's hand. "I felt so guilty that you had to leave school because of me. You gave up everything to pay my medical bills." "I would do it again," Lucy said firmly. "You're my mom. And now you have a second chance," Helen said, wiping away a tear. "So what will you do? Call Catherine Powell? Go back to school?" Lucy took a deep breath. "I think I'll do both. William Grant said the school would give me a full scholarship to finish my degree, and Catherine wants me to record an album." Helen laughed with joy. "My daughter, the recording artist." After leaving her mother's apartment, Lucy walked to a small park nearby. She sat on a bench and took out her phone. With slightly shaking hands, she dialed the number on Catherine Powell's card. Catherine answered on the second ring. Catherine Powell speaking. "Hello, Miss Powell. This is Lucy Bennett, the pianist from last night. Lucy, I was hoping you'd call. Please, call me Catherine." They talked for nearly half an hour. Catherine explained that Starlight Records wanted to sign Lucy for a 3-album contract. They would promote her as a new classical star, with a debut album of Chopin pieces. Lucy would need to come to New York for the recording sessions. "We'll cover all your expenses, of course," Catherine said. "And the advance should be enough for you to focus on music full-time." When Lucy hung up, she sat on the park bench for a long time watching children play on the swings. 3 years ago, she had put away her dream of being a professional pianist. Now it was suddenly possible again. Her phone rang again. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Hello," she answered. "Is this Lucy Bennett?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, it is." "This is Alan Roberts, Dean of Students at the Mason School of Music. I understand you're interested in returning to complete your degree." Lucy was surprised. William Grant had worked quickly. "Yes, that's right. We would be delighted to have you back, Ms. Bennett. Mr. Grant has explained your situation, and we've reviewed your previous academic record. You were one of our most promising students." They discussed the details of her return to school. Lucy would start in the fall semester, just 3 months away. The scholarship would cover all her tuition and books, plus a small living stipend. "Thank you so much, Dean Roberts," Lucy said, feeling overwhelmed by all the good news. "Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Your performance video from last night has already been seen by several of our faculty. We're excited to have you back." "Video?" Lucy asked, confused. "Yes, it's all over the internet this morning. Quite impressive. I'll send you the link." After they hung up, Lucy checked her email and found the video link. Someone at the charity event had recorded her playing Rachmaninoff and posted it online. It already had thousands of views and hundreds of comments praising her talent. Lucy walked back to her apartment in a daze. Everything was happening so fast. Just 2 days ago, she had been a waitress with a fading dream. Contract, a scholarship, and a viral video. When she got home, Lucy found a package leaning against her door. It was a large envelope with the Golden Leaf restaurant printed in the corner. Inside was a letter from Gina. "Dear Lucy," the letter began. "I wanted to apologize for never recognizing your talent and for sometimes treating you as just another server. What you showed us last night was extraordinary. While we will miss you at the Golden Leaf, I understand you'll be moving on to better things. Please accept the enclosed as a small token of our appreciation for your years of service. Also in the envelope was a check for $2,000 more money than Lucy usually made in a month at the restaurant. Lucy smiled at the gesture. She would miss Carlos and some of the other staff, but not the long hours on her feet or Gina's constant reminders to know her place. As Lucy was making a cup of tea, her phone rang again. This time, it was William Grant. "It's Bennett," he said when she answered. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "No, not at all," Lucy replied, still finding it strange to be talking to a billionaire. "On the phone? Wanted to make sure you connected with the school?" Grant said, "to see if you've made a decision about Catherine's offer." "Yes to both," Lucy said. "I'll be returning to school in the fall, and I'll be recording an album with Starlight Records." "Excellent," Grant said. "There's one more thing. I've established a new scholarship fund through my foundation. It will help music students who have to leave school due to financial hardship or family emergencies." "That's wonderful," Lucy said sincerely. "It's called the Lucy Bennett Scholarship Fund," Grant continued. "If you're willing, I'd like you to be involved in selecting the recipients." Lucy was speechless for a moment. I would be honored," she finally managed to say. "Good. My assistant will be in touch with the details." Grant paused, and Lucy, "I want to thank you again. Your talent reminded me why I started the music education charity in the first place. Music changes lives. It certainly changed mine when I was young." After they hung up, Lucy sat at her piano. She played softly, thinking about everything that had happened and all the changes to come. She would have to find a new apartment in New York, prepare for recording sessions, get ready to return to school. It was overwhelming but exciting. Her phone beeped with a text message. It was from her mother. "Just saw your video online. So proud of you, honey." Lucy smiled and kept playing. The sound of her old, upright piano filled her small apartment. But soon, she would be playing on stages and in recording studios around the world. 3 months later, Lucy sat in a large recording studio in New York City. She wore a simple but an elegant black dress that Catherine had helped her pick out. Her first album was nearly complete. "Ready for the final piece?" Catherine asked from the control room. Lucy nodded and placed her hands on the keys of the magnificent grand piano. She began to play Debussy's Clair de Lune. It's the same piece she had played at the end of the charity event that changed her life as she played. She thought about her journey, the years of practice as a child, the joy of being accepted to music, school, the heartbreak of her mother's illness, the long hours as a waitress, the humiliation by William Grant, and finally, the moment when she showed her true self through music. When she finished recording, Catherine came into the studio with tears in her eyes. "That was perfect, Lucy. Absolutely perfect." Lucy smiled. It felt right. "Your album release is scheduled for next month," Catherine said. "And we already have interest from concert halls in Chicago, New York, and even London. Your story has captured people's imagination." That evening, Lucy called her mother from her new apartment near the music school, where she had just started classes again. "How does it feel," Helen asked, "to have your dreams coming true?" Lucy looked around at her new life, the spacious apartment, with a beautiful baby grand piano, the framed poster for her upcoming album release, the textbooks for her music theory classes. "It feels like I'm finally where I belong," Lucy said. "And it all started because someone underestimated me." "Because you never gave up your passion," Helen added. "Even when you were serving tables, you kept playing." Lucy smiled. "I have a concert in Chicago next month. Front row seat for you." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Helen said. After they hung up, Lucy walked to her piano and began to play. The music flowed from her fingers, filling her new home with beautiful sounds. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer just serving others. She was sharing her gift with the world. And somewhere across the city, a young waitress with dreams of becoming a writer was serving dinner to wealthy customers, waiting for her moment to shine.